Brown eyes, the calm looks smart effect. Brown eyes walk into a room and immediately look like they know what's going on. They don't, but their eyes are lying for them. Brown eyes contain high levels of melanin, which absorbs excess light instead of letting it bounce around inside the eye. Less glare, less visual chaos. A steadier signal reaches the brain. When your visual system isn't constantly fighting brightness, your nervous system stays calmer by default. Calm gets mistaken for intelligence all the time. In classrooms, meetings, and tests, brown-eyed people often look more focused under bright lights. They blink less, squint less, fidget less. Teachers unconsciously rate them as more attentive. Bosses read confidence into their stillness. Other people assume they have it together. None of that measures IQ, it measures sensory comfort. Personality-wise, this is why brown-eyed people get labeled grounded, reliable, or the responsible one, even when they're just quietly panicking like everyone else. Their eyes aren't broadcasting stress, so the brain behind them gets bonus credibility. Brown-eyed people also tend to perform more consistently in visually stressful environments. Fluorescent lights, screens, long exams. That consistency looks like intelligence, even when cognitive ability is identical. Same brain power. Less sensory interference? Brown eyes don't make you smarter, they just make thinking look easier, and humans fall for that every time. Blue eyes. When sensitivity gets mistaken for stupidity. Blue eyes get accused of zoning out when they're actually just overstimulated, which is rude, and very on brand for humans. Blue eyes have very low melanin, which means light doesn't get absorbed. It scatters everywhere. That scattering makes vision sharp and detailed, but also noisy. In modern life full of LEDs, screens, and overhead lighting that feels like it was designed by villains, blue eyes are doing extra work just to stay stable. More background work equals faster fatigue. Fatigue gets mistaken for low intelligence constantly. In school or meetings, blue-eyed people blink more, squint more, look away more, and seem distracted sooner. Not because they aren't thinking, but because their brain is filtering more raw visual input before thinking even starts. Their attention isn't gone, it's busy. In terms of perception, this is why blue-eyed people get labeled daydreamers, spacey, or lost in thought. Translation: their nervous system is buffering. Give them softer lighting or a calmer environment, and suddenly they're sharp, articulate, and very much present. Blue-eyed people often do just as well, or better, in quiet, low-glare settings. But standardized environments don't adjust for light sensitivity. Performance drops get blamed on ability instead of conditions. Same intelligence, different sensory load. Blue eyes don't lower IQ, they just make modern environments more expensive for the brain, and people confuse the cost with competence. If this is already changing how you think about intelligence, subscribe to The Explainer Scientist for real biology without personality myths or fake science. Green eyes, high performance, narrow sweet spot. Green eyes are what happen when genetics aim for balance and accidentally become selective. Not weak, just optimized for specific conditions. Green eyes sit between blue and brown in melanin levels, which means they absorb some light and scatter some. This creates a visual system that performs extremely well under moderate, stable lighting. When conditions are right, green-eyed people often show sharp focus, strong attention, and quick understanding. When conditions aren't right, performance drops, not intelligence. Harsh glare, flickering lights, or constantly changing brightness force the visual system to keep recalibrating. That extra sensory work drains energy before thinking even starts. Observers don't see the recalibration happening, so they assume inconsistency in ability instead of recognizing environmental strain. "You were sharp yesterday" becomes "why are you off today?" even though the brain itself hasn't changed. Socially speaking, this is why green-eyed people get labeled particular, moody, or needs things just right. In reality, their sensory system simply has a narrower efficiency range. When the environment fits, performance is excellent. When it doesn't, visible output drops, and that drop gets misread as lower intelligence. The fix is environmental control, not effort. Green-eyed people perform better when glare is reduced, lighting stays consistent, and visual input isn't constantly shifting. Neutral or lightly tinted glasses, softer lighting, and stable screen brightness often restore focus quickly. Green eyes don't lower IQ. They expose how easily intelligence gets confused with environmental compatibility. Hazel eyes, too adaptable for their own reputation. Hazel eyes get accused of being unfocused because they don't stay in one mode, which is funny because adaptability is literally the skill everyone claims to want. Hazel eyes have uneven melanin distribution across the iris, meaning some areas absorb light efficiently while others scatter it. This gives hazel-eyed people a visual system that adjusts quickly across mixed or changing environments, bright to dim, screen to window, indoor to outdoor. The system shifts fast, often without conscious effort. In classrooms or meetings, hazel-eyed people often switch attention quickly, notice changes early, and jump between ideas with ease. To observers who expect long, uninterrupted focus, this looks like distraction. In reality, it's dynamic attention, tracking multiple inputs at once and prioritizing in real time. From a personality angle, this is why hazel-eyed people get labeled indecisive, restless, or scattered. But when situations change rapidly, they're usually the first to adapt without stress. They don't freeze, they recalibrate. The fix isn't forcing longer focus, it's simplifying the input. Hazel-eyed people perform best when visual clutter is reduced, screens use darker themes instead of bright white, and lighting comes from a single consistent source. Once excess stimuli are removed, their adaptability turns into precision. Hazel eyes don't lack focus. They just refuse to lock onto one channel when five are active. Hazel eyes don't struggle with intelligence. They struggle with tests that confuse flexibility for weakness. Gray eyes. Calm gets mistaken for brilliance. Gray eyes look serious before they do anything. That alone earns them credit. Not because they're smarter, but because their visual signal stays calm. Gray eyes have low melanin like blue eyes, but their iris structure scatters light evenly instead of chaotically. The result is a balanced, low reactivity visual feed. Less squinting, less blinking, fewer visible stress signals. When the eyes don't broadcast effort, the brain behind them looks composed. Composure gets mistaken for intelligence constantly. In classrooms, interviews, and tests, gray-eyed people often appear analytical and controlled. Teachers and evaluators read emotional neutrality as focus. Peers interpret quiet confidence as depth. Expectations rise, and higher expectations quietly boost performance through better feedback, more patience, and more trust. This is why gray-eyed people get labeled logical, serious, or intense, even when they're just internally narrating grocery lists. Their eyes don't advertise strain, so their thinking gets assumed to be effortless. The fix isn't changing anything, it's avoiding the halo effect. Gray-eyed people can benefit from actively checking assumptions, asking for clarity, pacing responses, and making thinking visible when needed so calm doesn't get mistaken for certainty. Gray eyes don't increase IQ, they increase perceived competence, and IQ tests quietly reward that perception. Amber eyes, fast thinking gets labeled reckless. Amber eyes don't think slower, they think faster than the room expects them to, and then get told to calm down. Amber eyes get their color from pheomelanin, which reflects light instead of absorbing it. This makes them especially good at detecting contrast, movement, and changes in the environment, particularly in daylight. The brain receives rapid visual updates, which encourages quick pattern recognition and fast responses. Speed looks suspicious to people who associate intelligence with deliberation. In classrooms and testing environments, quick answers often get second-guessed. Fast processing gets mislabeled as impulsivity. When amber-eyed people respond immediately, observers assume they didn't think deeply, even when the reasoning happened quickly and accurately. This is why amber-eyed people get tagged as bold, impatient, or too much energy. In reality, their sensory system is optimized for real-time problem solving, not slow, static tasks. They shine when situations demand quick decisions, adaptive thinking, and rapid pattern detection, skills that traditional IQ tests barely measure. The fix isn't slowing down the brain, it's slowing down the output. Amber-eyed people benefit from pausing briefly before answering, narrating their reasoning, or writing responses instead of blurting them out. Making the thinking visible prevents speed from being mistaken for shallowness. Amber eyes don't lower IQ, they expose how strongly we confuse thinking fast with thinking poorly. Complete heterochromia. Flexibility looks like uncertainty. Complete heterochromia is when each eye develops with a different melanin level. Same person, same brain, two slightly different visual feeds. This happens due to early developmental variation or genetic mosaicism. It's usually present from birth and harmless, but neurologically it trains something interesting: integration. Each eye filters light a little differently, and the brain blends the signals automatically. No panic, no dominance, just reconciliation. That early blending builds comfort with contradiction. People with complete heterochromia often tolerate opposing ideas, switch perspectives easily, and adjust conclusions when new information shows up. They don't lock onto one narrative just because it arrived first. Their thinking stays flexible under change. Here's the problem: flexibility looks suspicious. In classrooms, interviews, and debates, certainty gets mistaken for intelligence. Decisive answers feel smart. Changing your mind feels weak. When someone pauses, weighs options, or says, "it depends," observers read uncertainty, even when the reasoning is sophisticated. Personality-wise, this is why complete heterochromia gets paired with labels like detached, unconventional, or hard to read. In reality, the brain is integrating more variables before committing. The fix is framing. Leading with a clear conclusion, "here's my answer," and then explaining the nuance protects flexible thinking from being misread. Structure turns adaptability into authority. Complete heterochromia doesn't boost IQ. It exposes how often rigidity gets rewarded over reasoning. If this changed how you think about intelligence, hit like, drop your eye color in the comments, and subscribe to The Explainer Scientist for biology that explains people better than assumptions ever could.